Hello there, thanks for staying with us on the program People, Politics and Power, and it is coming to you on your channel of choice, Africa Independent Television, AIT. Now the search for a united Nigeria continues as the debate on restructuring gets more interesting, with every region attempting to articulate and put forward its standpoint. A conference of northern Nigerian leaders under the umbrella of the Arewa Research and Development Project ended in Kaduna last week and probably completed the divergent positions of all groups in the country. The project is expected to move beyond the conference in Kaduna to the grassroots with more inclusive consultations. But it may be safe to say at this point that there will be areas of convergence for the north, the southeast, the middle belt, the southwest, and the south-south geopolitical zones. Now, despite whatever differences that may exist, Nigeria must exploit the divergent views of the different nationalities. How do we achieve this? With me in the studio is Dr. Paddy Njoku. Dr. Paddy Njoku is a mediator, a chartered mediator and conciliator, a three-term president of the Institute of Chartered Mediators and Conciliators. He is also the president of the International Institute of Leadership and Governance. He is the national dean of the Association of Ambassadors of Peace. Dr. Paddy Njoku, thank you so much for finding the time to join us.
My pleasure.
All right, but before we take on the issues, let us take a listen to some views that came out of the meeting in Kaduna last week.
Restructuring to me means so many things to so many people. And let me say what they mean to me. Just to me, I'm not speaking now on behalf of Paul Onongo. Paul Onongo may have his views on some of these things. The Northern Elders Forum may also have views, but we as individuals within these groups also have views. When I was really confronted by some of these agitations, especially by people at very highly intellectual place from the southern part, let me mention, I don't always miss mentioning Professor Nwabuze, who is a constitutional lawyer. We sat down in a triangle, himself, myself, and Paul Onongo, and we asked him what is restructuring. What do they want? That was the time they were trying to put this conference on 2014, which I always refer to as Jonathan's conference. It's not even a Nigerian conference, let alone being a constitutional conference. He said Nigeria is imbalanced. So what do you mean by Nigeria is imbalanced? He said that Lugard made a mistake by putting the northern protectorate, by putting together northern protectorate with the southern protectorate. And since then, Nigeria remained imbalanced. The north had always dominated the Nigerian state, and so on and so forth. And that's why Nigeria has not made progress. And this is why they are asking for this national conference in 2014. We said, well, please explain what you really mean by this imbalance and how this happens to be the problem coming from northern Nigeria. So, well, northern Nigeria has dominated. We reminded him that the North had always sacrificed for the unity of this country. I was a student at the University of Ibadan when Nigeria got its independence in 1960. So we have a fair idea of what Nigeria was at that time and the problems before independence, the different regions where they stood in political terms and so on. But we saw that each time there was an effort to unify the position of Nigeria as one country, it was the North that made the largest sacrifices. And even after the 1966 event, it was the North that sacrificed. Our own General Gowon took over and decided that Nigeria should be broken into 12 states, 6 in the south, 6 in the north. And this is regardless of the fact that the north had the population that would justify more states in the north than elsewhere, and more territorial expansion and so on. But our general agreed it should be. And we supported that because the North had always wanted a peaceful country. So this is what has continued to be. Up to now, we are talking about 36 states from 3 regions in 1960. And so many constitutional conferences. There has never been a country that I know of today that has gone through so many constitutional conferences Nigeria had. After independence, we had 6. And all these conferences have not succeeded in creating the base or basis that are required for a stable, unified country. So there must be something else that is driving all these agitations. And I think this something else has nothing to do with really the failure of the structure, but the failure of the operators for various reasons. So for me, if we want to restructure Nigeria, the starting point is 1914.
I think God has put us together. We are one country now, and for 57 years, I don't think we should waste a lot of our time discussing as to whether we should be together or we should not be together. The most important thing, particularly for me, is really to sit down and define the terms of our coming together. There are a lot of questions that are being raised. Now is the time. I think 57 years is good enough time for us to sit down and define what the relationship should be. This has also gone on for a long time. Since the Europeans came, we have had quite a number of constitutional amendments or new constitutions and so on. These have been mentioned variously during this conference, and particularly by Dr. Kabir Sate and a number of other speakers. Some of the important constitutions that we have witnessed in this country include, of course, the Clifford Constitution, the Richards Constitution of 1946, Clifford was done 1922, the Preston Constitution of 1951, Littleton Constitution of 1954, the Independence Constitution, and 1963 Constitution, which is now becoming some sort of a darling of the people of Nigeria or particular sections of this country, 1979, 1993, 1999 Constitutions, which are variously being referred to as military constitutions, which were actually not. Because all these constitutions, Nigerians participated in them. Even during the colonial times, Nigerians participated in them, and Nigerians had a say. They contributed to what should be in those constitutions. So these are all our constitutions. I don't think there is anything wrong with any, particularly the current constitutions that are being referred to as the military constitution.
All right, welcome back. Those were some voices from the Kaduna Conference of Northern Leaders, including, of course, Professor Ango Abdullahi, who contends that the failure of a system does not necessarily depend on its structure, but the operatives of that system. Well, Dr. Paddy Njoku is still very much with me in the studio, and that will be our point of departure in our discussion. What do you consider to be the relationship between the structure of a nation state and its political stability and economic progress?
Well, I think, thank you very much in the first place for having me. I think they are all intertwined. The structure is important, even the geographical structure. You know, some countries, some nations are islands in the middle of the ocean. Others are landlocked. So right from the geographical structure to the administrative structure. But most importantly, the structure of the mind of the people who are running the other structures. If the mind is structured in such a way that people are so individualistic, so, permit me to say, sectional, people are not altruistic, then nationalism suffers at the global level of that nation. And as long as we continue having regionalists who have turned into Statians instead of Nigerians, this problem will continue. I listened with rapt attention to Professor Abdullahi, and he said we went from 3 regions to 36 states. We went from 3 regions, all right, to 4 regions. Then people were behaving like people from Nigeria, people from certain regions. But today, most people, you see, when you ask them, where do you come from? You just give you a state. And once the person's mindset is limited to a state, anything happening in the other state negatively does not concern that person. Anything happening positively does not interest that person. And the person wants to draw the blanket only to his own side.
We have become less Nigerians and more conscious of our statehood and our ethnic nationalities.
Nationalities. That's why I tell you that we have stopped being Nigerians, we are now Statians. You ask somebody, which state do you come from? Okay, and then when you get into the state, the trouble continues. You see the 3 what do you call them? Senatorial zones. They say no, power must go from here to there and from here to there. Nobody asks for the best person, even from that state, to run the state structure. We ask for ours to run it. And this stems from the fact that we've been running a rent economy. We are sharing rent. So we are not looking for the best people to produce something for us. We look for our own who will be doing the sharing so that we'll get a lion's share. And this has permeated, unfortunately, this has been going on for almost half a century now.
Whether the person who is from our place is qualified and has the capacity and the capability to do it or not.
Exactly.
We
want him there because he's our own. Okay? And unfortunately, since we got into the oil boom that turned into an oil doom, it's about half a century now. Children born 50 years ago are the ones agitating now because they are used to seeing people go for budget, share money, go for FAC meeting, federal allocation, and then we announce that, okay, today we shared so many billions, these people got this, these people got this. We're not, I mean, you don't even look for a very efficient commissioner of finance. You look for somebody who can go there and grab the check and come back quickly and give to the governor. And if two of them come from the same local government or senatorial zone, too bad for the rest of you in the state. So the point I'm making is that structure is important, quite all right, but the structure of the mind has to be worked on. And we must discuss. I have a little boy, one of my sons. I always feel happy when he says, "Daddy, I want to have a discussion with you." I said, "Oh, good. This boy is responsible. He's not just a passenger in this house. He wants to contribute." And it makes me feel proud. It makes me also feel that when I'm no longer there, this boy would have acquired the culture of discussion. And this is what we should try to be harping on, instead of saying, let's scatter, let's die. Let's dialogue instead of dying. Let's jaw instead of warring. And structure is important, but I think mindset is also very, very important.
We need to restructure our minds.
We need to restructure our minds. Very, very important. AIT, I think you guys are doing a good job. But if High Chief Dokwesi had gathered people all from his village to be running AIT, it probably wouldn't have been as efficient as it is today. But he gathered talents from all over the country. And this is how we should run a nation. But we must discuss how we run it in harmony. It's absolutely necessary. There's nothing you don't discuss. So that's why I'm happy about the Northerners, as we say, coming together to discuss. Let's not say, you see, if you don't discuss, you implode. But even in mediation, what we do, no matter how bitter you feel about this your colleague, if I want to mediate between you, I'll make you talk and talk and talk and talk until you remove all the venom in your heart. I talk to the colleague, he does the same thing, and then we can now come together since all the emotion has been let out. So we can now come to logic. We can come to reason. But if we bottle everything up and say, we can't talk, it becomes dangerous. It leads to implosion or explosion.
Just a little over 2 weeks ago,
yes,
Nigeria celebrated 57 years of independence, of nationhood, as it were. But there are those who have continued to argue that in those 57 years we have remained just a mere geographical expression, and that we have hardly become welded together as a nation state.
Because partially because of the factors I mentioned earlier. Partially in the sense that the things that bind us together we are not exploiting and exploring. Because every day we are sharing. As I said, I talked about that during the independence celebrations. Because we now have 36 or 37 knives for sharing the cake. Okay? As the size of the cake starts dwindling, we start using the knives on ourselves. I mean, we have 811 governments in this country, 774 local governments, 37 state governments plus FCT, an amorphous federal government with 500 and something parastatals, a very powerful presidency, all wanting to feed from that cake. Are you getting the point?
Yes.
And the source of the cake is, if you like, just unitary. That breeds contempt.
Possibly just one source, oil.
Exactly.
Right. So none of these other units seem to be contributing to the baking of that cake, but all are interested in sharing.
My brother, when you, at times I travel, I pass through Ajaokuta, I weep. Because
anyone who does, we weep.
I've been to 37 countries in Africa. I mean, many African countries would even like to come together to own Ajaokuta. But it's there rusting.
Wasting away.
Wasting and rusting in spite of the huge investments we put there. And nobody is talking about it. All we're talking about is how derivation, how many percent you give us from that cake. So this has destroyed our mind, our mindset, our unity, our nationalism. I think we should talk about these things. It's not just structuring for the North will stay there, the South will stay there, the what you call them. No, we should think about our lives. And look at it. I mean, a country that is almost 60% youth heavy, and we are not planning for them developing industries they will engage in as we retire. We are not giving them the opportunities to use these wonderful resources that God has kept in their heads to plan for the country. I've always said it. This young man, Zuckerberg, is richer than a major part of Africa, just from his head. And because he had the opportunity to use it, he got encouraged. We have people like him in this country. Those are the things we should add in our restructuring discussion, not just the geography of restructuring. And if we don't do so, we are insulting God who put so much human resources in this country. And I've always said that Nigeria is a geological scandal. I've not seen any other country in the world that has as much minerals in their varieties under our soil. Nobody's talking about them. And nobody is developing our youth to think and see how they can exploit them legally. We are very busy talking about who will rule at that and stay at that table where the cake is being cut.
So do you honestly believe that it is the craze for power that has, or the so-called denial of power to certain groups or certain sections of the country that may have led to these renewed and continued agitations for restructuring?
Nigeria is a large polygamous family. And all problems that occur in large families are multiplied in Nigeria. And one of the tenets for achieving harmony in a polygamous family is inclusion. Once children of a certain mother feel that they are hated because they are from this mother, hatred sets in. They would want to bring in unhealthy competition to prove to the others that even though your father loves you more than us, we'll show you that we progress better than you. And it can lead to anything. And then you can imagine among 170 million people what this can generate. So we need inclusion. You talked about the craze for power. But that power should be the power to wield together and forge the nation ahead as one progressive, large family.
Now that takes me to my next point. At independence in 1960, we voluntarily gave ourselves the 1960 Constitution, at which we said we were going to be a federal republic. Now, supposedly to address some of these issues that you have raised that are common with polygamous settings. Has that federal system worked for us? Has it failed us? If it has, why has it?
At independence, we had this federal system. Mind you, people say that if you don't know when the rain started beating you, you mightn't know when it stops. Our federal system was scrapped by the military, by Decree number 4 of 1966. And that destroyed that system that allowed people to express themselves economically, socially in their own regions. But
so up to that time, it was working for us?
Yeah, it was working. It was working. I mean, I don't want to repeat the things everybody says every day. It was working in the sense that there was very healthy competition. These people, we hear that, oh, these people have built a university. The other region would say, I mean, what are we doing? They will go and build their own, okay? Or they have built a television house. They go and, the others will go and compete. And mind you, I've always said this. The premier of the northern region, without a deputy premier, was doing the work of developing the entire region called the North, which 19 governors are now doing, with 19 deputies, with 19 state cabinets. I can't mention
of varying sizes.
Exactly. I can't mention the number of EAs, SAs, PAs, SSAs,
permanent
secretaries, and so on and so forth. You see, so the regions were working. It was a federal system, but the military, in their tradition, have to have unitary command, supreme commander, and they scrapped these things. And of course, one man remained in command, in the supreme command. Unfortunately, how many years after, 50-something years after, we are still maintaining that unitary command. Okay? And the population has, if you like, exploded. The problems have multiplied. So we now need to look back to say, are we still under a military structure? Are we still under a military mentality? We must look at different options, and different parts of the country should be given the opportunity to look at the options, express themselves, and that's why I am very happy that every part of the country is meeting and discussing. But listen, let's talk of restructuring, not dissolving. Restructuring does not mean dissolving. Are you getting the point?
Yes, I am.
So, and this is where some people are afraid. Others have been intimidated by very vociferous arguments and, you know, shibboleths that are flying right, left, and center. But we must say that this is Nigeria, it's our country. We're proud to have a country of 170 million people, but we must make it worth living in.
So dialogue is the answer, as you have put it.
Yes.
Now, what mood or what pattern should that dialogue take? Now, we have seen various groups from various geopolitical zones and various regions come together, articulate their views and say, this is what we want the Nigeria of today or of tomorrow to look like. These other groups have come together, they have done the same and all of that. Now, how do we move forward in this? Because we seem to have held our individual conferences, summits, whatever you want to call them, and resolved amongst ourselves in these different units to say, this is what we want of Nigeria. This is what we are demanding of Nigeria. Now, some of those views might be similar. Some might just be very divergent. They might be very, very divergent from each other. But like you said, dialogue will now weld all of them together, and we must, at a point, reach some agreements and some consensus to say this is the way to go. How should that dialogue proceed?
Thank you. The divergence in opinions is very natural, it's very normal. If everybody talked and everybody agreed on just one point, then it's a country of 170 million fools. The fact that people say we want it this way, the others say we want it, that shows the reasoning faculty in us, first and foremost. So let's not be afraid of divergence of opinion. Let's also not be afraid of dialogue, common dialogue. As the saying goes, let's not negotiate out of fear, but let's also not fear to negotiate. You've said that various groups have talked. When you talk of leaders, national leaders, the expectation we have of them today is how to wield these various groups together in a harmonious atmosphere so that they can talk. People have talked about the National Assembly, okay, which is already a constituted body for making laws. But unfortunately, when they looked at the issue of devolution of powers, which also my friends, the truck pushers and water sellers here and there do not understand, because it's not broken down to them. They jettisoned it. So people started losing confidence in them, in their ability to come together and discuss these issues. One would expect that the leaders of the country at the top level will bring the various leaders together now and say, you have all talked. Let's talk as mature leaders of our various people and see how we can come together.
Can we still say with certainty that we have leaders today we can call national leaders? Since everyone is seem to be withdrawing into his or her share, either his ethnic, regional, or state.
Yes, because people feel they have been denied opportunities. I tell you what sparked off these things was the issue of appointments. People were appointed from here, people were not appointed from there. If we changed the national narrative and we weren't depending on appointments, okay? People would appreciate you for what you are, what you contribute. I was thinking about it the other day. If you called Aliko Dangote now to come and be a minister, he would say, look, my friend, you hate me. You want me to leave this conglomerate that I am...
My business empire. To
come and be attending meetings and fake meetings and all this, and I don't have time. Okay? If you call the Maduka, Vincent Maduka, for example, to come, you say, no, my empire will go down. So those of us who are idle, okay, who feel left out and denied, will continue stoking the fire from our different corners because we want to come there at this central table and share.
Have a piece of the
national cake. So as long as we continue, concentrating on this national cake, we'll continue having these people you are talking about, who are now receding into their tribal cocoons. I think that this is a challenge that faces us as a nation and as adults of today, and we must also face it. We can't live in denial. We can't go and wake our ancestors to come and solve the problems for us. We can't go and hasten the birth of the ones yet unborn to come and solve our problems for us. We must be realistic and start reaching out. You must do caucusing, outreach. There are people who still can come to say, look, gentlemen, whatever it takes, God has kept us here to be able to sort our problems out. We can't import people to do it. Let's find a solution. That is what, of course, you do in mediation and conciliation, and arrive at, and in mediation and conciliation anyway, you always tell people that something, there is a love we were sharing, a relationship we were sharing that gave birth to this conflict. Let's save that relationship.
Okay, now we'll go back to the issue of devolution of power that we were talking about and the role that the National Assembly has played or will play. But just a little bit of diversion. These people, these agitators, these national leaders, you find them on a regular basis. They from every part, from ethnic nationality, from every region, from every religion, they belong to same political parties. They eat together, they drink together, they share almost everything together. They do not see anything wrong with what they are doing at that point in time. But when it comes to the scramble for power, for their regions, for their ethnic groups, and for all of that, they bear their fangs. Why is that so?
Because of this point I made earlier about our running a political rent economy, where we share rents from oil at the end of the month. Okay? People have become diversionary in the management of public affairs. When, for example, you elect a parliament, they find one issue to be talking about and divert attention from salient issues disturbing people. Okay? So we can spend the whole, months talking about your wardrobe allowance. Okay? And that diverts attention.
Or furniture allowance.
Or furniture allowance. Or constituency allowance. And that diverts attention for a very long time. When we are done with that, we find one other issue. We may discuss the uniform of the Director General of one agency or the other. That takes some months. Then the budget. After some time, we say the budget is missing. Then we start following that. Then after that, now we are talking of devolution or non-devolution. And the poor Nigerian who is in the streets does not understand what these mean. Are you getting the point? But when they finish diverting your attention and my attention, they go back in the evening and drink and eat together. So this issue of devolution, very important as it is intellectually. As I said, if you ask the ordinary Nigerian in the street, what does it mean? You say, he doesn't understand. But it has occupied us for a very long time. We should break these things down to the level of understanding of the people so that the people can participate. Our people are alienated from the leadership class because they see, as you rightly said, that these people are united when their particular interests are at stake. But once they finish with that, then other issues that should concern the people now become issues of war. I've always told them that, look, there's no difference between a southern beggar and a northern beggar. They are all beggars. Okay? But
poverty has no ethnicity.
It has no ethnicity. It has no color.
Mm.
Okay? But when it suits some people's purpose, they go and stir up beggars from certain areas to say, no, we no go agree, we no go agree. Are you getting the point? As if their problem is different from those of the other region. So our people are feeling alienated from the leadership class. And that's why you are asking the question, whether we still have credible leaders who can be trusted at the national level. I think some of them exist. But we must also start phasing out those obsolete ones who depend on division, tribalism, sectionalism all the time. The youth of Nigeria, I'm patron of so many youth organizations. When you come there and see them mixed up, you wouldn't know who is from where. And we should start getting them involved. I have always told people that if at the age of 65 you start building a new house, take the interest of your children more in the construction and the structure of that house than your own, because they have a longer time to live in that house than you. But what is happening is that you see octogenarians, nonagenarians who are fighting about the structure they want to retain in this nation, not asking how long they will stay around in that structure. The youth should be involved.
Okay. Well, as agitations for a better Nigeria continues, President Muhammadu Buhari's administration has declared his full support for the restructuring of Nigeria. Special advisor to the president on media and publicity, Femi Adesina, gave the confirmation at a public lecture in Abuja with the theme restructuring, reintegration or restructuring, which way forward. Similarly, the Gombe State Governor, Ibrahim Hassan Dankwabo, has advised state legislatures to make the unity of Nigeria their central theme as they commence work on the constitution amendment process. Of course, that process was recently passed at the National Assembly and sent to the state legislatures. And Dankwabo was actually speaking the state house speakers of the state houses of assembly controlled by the opposition People's Democratic Party, PDP, met him at the government house in Gombe. Governor Dankwabo charged the state lawmakers to look passionately into agitations for restructuring with patriotism at the back of their minds.
Another forum to highlight the essence of unity in the country in the light of events dominating news headlines across the country. Governor Ibrahim Hassan Dankwabo used this forum to add his voice to the already burning agitation for restructuring, going further on calling for solutions instead of sanctions.
What I believe is that where there are a lot of agitation, there is a fundamental problem that needs to be addressed. So our responsibility of our leaders is not to blacklist, is not to use force, but to understand these fundamental problems and resolve them.
Though admitting that the People's Democratic Party had made mistakes during their 16 years rule, he says the party is ready to take correction by making policies that will add value to the common man.
We must also make sure that the well-being of our people is paramount. Irrespective of what it takes, you must be able to add value to the human being. You should not take away value, you must add value.
Earlier, the leader of the delegation and Speaker of the Enugu State House of Assembly, Honorable Edward Ibosi, said the visit was to kickstart a process by which the legislature will be on the same page with the governors on relevant national issues.
There's alteration of the 1999 Constitution as amendments going on now. So, for the fact the relationship between us and our governors is quite cordial. We want to be in the same page. We want to articulate one or two things then when we meet so that all of us will be in the same page.
Another opportunity indeed as legislature charts a new way forward for the country.
Speakers of state houses of assembly that are controlled by the PDP, the opposition PDP, met in Gombe State, and they, of course, had that session with the governor where he was saying, that's talking of Governor Dan Kwambo, that they need to look at the constitutional amendments with a lot of patriotism. And of course, Dr. Paddy Njoku brings us back to the issue of what role these state assemblies and the National Assembly, the National Legislature and the state legislatures should play in this restructuring exercise, in the restructuring debate. President Muhammadu Buhari, during his Independence Day speech, also alluded to that when he said, yes, we must restructure, but we should do it through the legal processes, that's through the National Assembly and through the state assemblies.
Yes, I was also happy to hear that our friend Femi Adesina, the senior special assistant, has expressed the feeling of the presidency that restructuring should be discussed and should be done. But then, as the president said, it should be done methodically through the legislature. But the question now arises. I was telling you here that in the first dispensation that we had 3 legislatures at the regional level and the federal one. Good. Now we have 36 houses of assembly and a national assembly. And you want them to all go through this and vote after the National Assembly might have taken their time to go on recess, come back, vote, do their readings, first reading, second reading, third reading, and so on and so forth, and amendments, and then send to the states. And start going from one state to the other until we complete 36 states. By that time, the life of the regime may have expired, and we start looking for another one.
And we start afresh.
And we start afresh.
Yes.
Because when these things, expire, they expire.
Yes.
And we start afresh. So I think it will be expedient to find ways of doing it and doing it faster without breaching the Constitution if we have to follow the Constitution. We have had what you call doctrines of necessity in this country, which we can use because the desire is in everybody's heart now. You saw what Governor Dan Kwambo said, that we must be looking at the welfare of our people, not just debating for debating's sake. So if we want to occupy ourselves for the next 2 years with just debating, we can do it. But like I always said, somebody running a huge family who knows that there are necessities, we can always bring people together, come together to find acceptable, workable solutions. Involve the legislature, involve the people, involve the executive, and say, how do we move faster and move our country forward? The rest of the world is not waiting for us. I mean, the world is moving. People are now telling you they want to manufacture cars that are no longer going to use petrol.
Petrol, yeah.
And then we are very busy here talking about the structure of how to share our petrol or how not to share it, when the people who are buying it are telling you that very soon
we won't buy petrol no more.
So let's try to move at the pace of the world and stop quibbling. Let's let's discuss and move.
So you do not support those who suggest, for instance, that, look, let's put aside all the existing structures and let's come to a table to discuss what the future of Nigeria should be.
That's an option. That's what I'm saying. All options should be laid bare. But let's not say we are going to dissolve the country. No. Whatever you think, God has given you the thinking faculty. Whatever you think is good for the country, bring it out on the table. And let nobody tell you not to think. Not to talk of telling you not to talk. So that option you talked about now is one of the options. Okay? So, if people bring their options, provided we create a table where these options can be discussed, let us use the force of argument to convince people, not the argument of force. That's all. Bring your options. You say you want 2 regions. We say, okay, let's discuss the merits and the demerits. You say you want 50, how many states? We say, okay, let's discuss the merits and the demerits. I can come up and tell you that we don't have the resources to run 50 states, unless they are going to stay on their own and not take anything from the center. Then you convince me. But for us to say, no, don't talk at all. Okay, we are going to talk, but it has to pass through 1,000 legislatures. Then I know that you are telling me a very smart lie. Because by the time you finish, the whole thing might have turned into another thing. So I totally agree with you that options must be looked at. I told you here that if 170 million people stay together and all agree on one idea, one thing, then something is wrong with that.
All right, we've got to leave it at that. Dr. Paddy Njoku is a chartered mediator and arbitrator.
And conciliator.
Yes. Rather. He is or was a 3-term president of the Institute of Chartered Mediators and Conciliators. He is the president, International Institute of Leadership and Governance, and the National Dean of the Association of Ambassadors for Peace. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
On People.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right, that's our program for today. Join us again when we bring you a fresh edition of People, Politics, and Power. Do have yourself a wonderful day for the rest of today. Bye.